minutes, in a little while they might come through that door, so yeah, we'll just know if they start to come through, they will sit around here. I'm Nina Stritzler-Levine, Director of the Bard Graduate Center Gallery, and to say the least, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to this evening. In many ways, this is a moment that I have been waiting for a long time. Before I turn to tonight's event, I would like to express my appreciation to Melissa Gerstein for organizing this program. And I think that they're in the hall, and it gives me an opportunity to thank my colleagues at the Bard Graduate Center. I have the privilege of working with wonderful people, and I would like to thank Hollis Barnhart and Grace Johnson for their work on communications on this project, Lindsay Lafreniere, where are you? In our development office, and the curatorial staff of the Bard Graduate Center, led by Marianne Monica. And foremost, I would like to thank Ian Sullivan. Where are you? The Bard Graduate Center exhibition designer who has traveled with me on this journey and to whom I am really in debt for the incredible work that he did on this project. So, just a little administrative matter. The evening is organized in 3 parts, a brief introduction by me. Then we will have the privilege of hearing Irma talk about Irma, which is a wonderful experience. Then she and I will have a conversation. That's an experience that I've been waiting to have publicly for a long time. And then we hope to have time to open up the floor to you for questions. So first, I guess the conventional way. And I will say a little bit about how Irma Boom became Irma Boom. Born and raised in the Netherlands, Irma Boom entered the university with the expectation of becoming a painter, but soon turned to graphic arts at the AKI Art Academy in, this is the hardest word to say in Dutch, Enschede, Holland.
Enschede.
Enschede. After graduation, her first job was for the Dutch government publishing and printing office in The Hague. In that capacity, she got an early reputation as a designer who stretched the boundaries of the profession, but I'm going to let her explain how. Irma Boom founded Irma Boom Office in 1991, and she's been the principal of what is now a thriving firm ever since. Based in Amsterdam, her practice primarily focuses on bookmaking, but to say, as we did in the title of this evening's event, that she is a bookmaker, period, simply does not do justice to what is in reality a multifaceted practice that includes all dimensions of graphic design and now exhibition design. Irma Boom's range of practices is demonstrated by an extraordinary client list, or what she calls commissioners, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment. In Holland, and the list is very long, but in brief, this includes the Dutch royal family, the Rijksmuseum, for which she did a new graphic identity, numerous publications, merchandising, and many components of exhibition design. Outside of Holland, she has an extraordinary, long, and diverse list of clients. Currently, the Fondation Prada, Chanel in Paris, and Renault. In the United States, she recently completed the collection catalog for the Cooper Hewitt Museum, and she has worked for MoMA and LACMA, among others. Boom's stature at home and in the profession is revealed by the commendations she has received, most notably the coveted Gutenberg Prize in 2001, and the Johannes Vermeer Award, better known in Holland, but of great prestige, it is the Dutch State Prize for the Arts in 2014. In addition, Boom is a consummate educator, and she is deeply committed to students. In the United States, since 1992, she has served as senior critic at the Yale University School of Art. She lectures at universities throughout the world, and in particular devoting time to small seminars with students, as she did last year in Japan. But that is the general way that we know of how Irma Boom became Irma Boom. The question is, what connects her to the Bard Graduate Center and ultimately to this project? To answer that question, I will do what I have now done for each of the programs here, and I think this is really important. I will connect Irma Boom to the leading protagonists in our narrative, the architects Ina Marcio Aalto and Alvar Aalto, and in fact, there are correlations between them and Irma Boom in notable ways. Specifically, I bring you to the winter in Finland of 1935, when 9 months before the founding of Artek, Aalto was convalescing at home after a serious bout of pneumonia. At that historical moment, despite the great success of the Pioneer Tuberculosis Sanatorium, completed in 1933, the year the Aaltos moved from Turku to Helsinki, and the Viipuri Municipal Library that would be completed that year, there were very few commissions. Consistent with the Aaltos situation throughout the early part of their career, when there was a meager amount of work in the office, their luck soon changed. In the exhibition, we have a copy of a letter Irma Aalto had written several months before to the Cordelin Foundation, applying for scholarship money that would enable herself and Aalto to travel to the continent on a research trip. We emphasize in the exhibition the importance of the Aalto's itinerant life to the becoming modern architects, and the possibility of a trip abroad, in this case, had a specific agenda. When the Cordelin scholarship money came several months later, the Aalto's lack of work was less of a pressing matter. In June 1935, when the Aaltos set off from Helsinki to the continent, the reason, in this case, was not actually architecture. Instead, it was a research trip about retailing. Since the early 1930s, the Aaltos Bentwood furniture had become increasingly popular on the continent, and by 1935 it was clear that a better organized, more formal business of some kind had to be established that would relieve the Korhonen factory in Turku of their retailing obligations. Therefore, this trip was largely devoted to what it was on the continent that was important about selling modern design. One of the great finds of the exhibition, a copy of Irma Aalto's travel diary, documents this journey. Among the many places they visited, some will be familiar to you: Galerie Lafayette in Paris, Steve Clair in Paris, the Womidorf store in Zurich. And then on June 14, 1935, Irma Aalto wrote about the visit to Amsterdam. The place was Metz & Company, one of the largest department stores in Europe at the time. She wrote extensively of the visit, noting the Great Dome, designed by Gerrit Rietveld. Unfortunately, if you go there today, you'll see that it's become not Hollister, but some American retail store. But what she enjoyed most about the visit were the textiles, the imported ones, especially from Africa, and the one that she ended up making a coat of for herself, purchased in the Metz department store in Amsterdam by the French artist Sonia Delaunay. But this trip to the Netherlands was in fact not the first one for the Aaltos. The first one was shortly after the beginning of what we call in the exhibition the transformation to becoming modern architects. And it was the year after they moved to Turku in 1928 when Aalto traveled to Holland with very specific reasons. It was to visit not the Pioneer Sanatorium, but Dwiker's Sanatorium in Hilversum. That sanatorium shaped his thinking about Pioneer, but it wasn't just Dwiker. It was also the long tradition of brick architecture. And if you visited Finland, you know that Aalto's brick architecture is a major motif in his work. The brick architecture of Holland, not only in Hilversum, but in Amsterdam as well. If I put my paper here, you'll see it. So where is the microphone? There it is. I'll talk. I apologize. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so you get half of my voice and half of me looking the other way. So, the narrative of the Aaltos connection, but there was more than architecture. There was also the Dutch Avant-Garde. Think about it. What was the Dutch Avant-Garde of the 1920s? It was a place like people like Liszewski, for example, came through. And this connection to the avant-garde is what I was thinking about when I first talked to Irma Boom about working on Artek. As many of you know, the gallery now has a comparatively long and highly distinctive association with Irma Boom office that began due to Sheila Hicks, who introduced me to Irma Boom in conjunction with the exhibition Sheila Hicks Miniatures in 2006. Can you hear me? The landmark publication that emerged in conjunction with that project introduced me, as a curator, to a new way of thinking about bookmaking. Frankly, it was more than that. Working with Irma Boom brought me into contact with another way of thinking about everything visual in the world. That's a lot. Various people have written about Boom's practice. Rem Koolhaas on her contribution to the continuation of bookmaking as a viable practice in a world immersed in the digital. Mathieu Lonen on her history and working method. I know Irma Boom through the role of what she calls commissioner, or what in comparable fields is the client. But what is this language? This designation, I would argue, is inextricably linked to the identity Boom has shaped for herself and her practice. Think about it. What are the associations we potentially make with the notion of being a commissioner? That is a dimension of practice generally associated with being an artist. And it is this identity as artist bookmaker that I would argue defines and distinguishes Boom and what it means to work with her as a commissioner. Recently, in a conversation with Marianne LaMonica, we were discussing the rather uncanny and fortuitous situation that the Maholi Nash retrospective and the Artek exhibition happened by chance to be on view in New York at the same time. I mention this now because, in fact, Boom's insistence on the notion of the commissioner connects her with the artists who in the 1920s transformed the commercial and graphic arts by freely crossing disciplines. And in this case, I'm thinking again, of course, of Liszewski and Maholi. If you saw the exhibition, you've seen that. Irma's practice has roots in their transformative work. Thus, the student who first wanted to be a painter, became a graphic designer, has a thriving practice as a bookmaker, and actually now works as well in the field of exhibition design, is exemplary of why we, as commissioners devoted to design and architecture, I realize, must do our part, pushing the boundaries of disciplines as well as of our own curatorial thinking. Curatorial thinking in a way that will enable the public to also rethink the limitations of disciplinary boundaries. Museums and academic institutions for too long have reinforced. So, this evening, I welcome you to contemplate that thought and to think when Irma Boom speaks about her own practice, to learn more about this radically gifted bookmaker, who not only moves us to think differently about books, but moves us as well to think differently about everything in the visual world. I welcome Irma Boom.
Well, thank you, Nina. That's very kind. And like I told you before, I've made all those books. I've got over 300, but I never feel that I made them. Never. For me, it's always a bit abstract. Who made the books? I think it's everybody's book in the end. It's your book, it's my book, it's the binder's book, it's the printer's book, it's everybody's book. And then the owner has the book, and then it's their book. So it's always a bit abstract. I also want to read a little bit, but then very short. I want to read something so you understand my way of working and how I think. And sorry about my voice, because I had a cold, and it's better than yesterday. Anyway, so I'll have a sort of statement. I honor the traditional book, but I do not want to stop there. My ambition is to develop the significance and the limitation, and to find the limitations of the book. Structures that come from new media, the way text and images are treated, have given the book a new impulse. It is important to experiment and not to be afraid sometimes to create utter failures. The book can keep its vitality. There's a lot to explore in a technical way, and even more importantly, in terms of content and form. Happily, through books, the past, present and future can take on profoundly contemporary results, and become part of our everyday. My role in making books is to give another life to a story. Working with different worlds, exchanging thoughts and ideas is one of the most valuable ingredients in my practice. What has always been important to me is the complete trust of my commissioner. I immediately drop my pen if there's no collaboration and if I feel we're not on the same track, no use to continue. But if it works, then the object that we collectively created hopefully pushes the boundaries of the definitions of what is a book. The role of the designer has changed in many ways. The designer has become more an author, not just serving a commissioner's need, but being part of the total creative process. And raising new questions, of course, is the most important. So that's what I wanted to say. And now, because if I read, I have a very dull voice, I think, so I always try to limit that thing. So the camera is a bit funny because it has a bit delay, I think. But anyway, what I wanted to show are my oldest books, the stamp books, and Nina already referred to it. These books are made in '88, and when I made them for the Postal Service in the Netherlands, Royal Postal Service. Everything in the Netherlands is royal. We had a queen, now we have a king, we have royal post, royal this, royal this, it's all royal. And which of course doesn't mean anything, you understand. So these books were totally inspired by Malevich. Nina said already that I went to art school to become a painter, and I never thought the whole idea of making books or graphic design that didn't exist in my world. Oh, sorry. I just swallowed my lifesaver. Oh, it's terrible. Yeah, it's so what. Oh, my voice is really hard. But anyway, where was I? So I met at art school. So I found out that I was not a painter. I was not an artist. I had this romantic idea of being in a studio and to make paintings, but it didn't happen. So I went to this Aki in Enschede. And that very liberal school, so if you were not happy at the department, you simply went to something else. So I tried architecture, fashion, photography. And at some point I met a teacher who came to the school with suitcases with books. Basically what I'm doing now here. Also, I brought my suitcase with books. I hardly have any clothes with me, but books. And I got so intrigued by this teacher. And he spoke about books, why books have a specific form, why a poetry book looks like a poetry book. And he would also read from the books and recite poetry. So I thought, well, whatever this is, I have to give it a try. And it was not only giving a try, I kept on, I became suddenly a designer and later on a book designer. And my first job was at the government printing office, the most dullest place ever. Because it's the government, it's the state. And, but you know, in Holland before everything was designed and we had a very good subsidy system. And so also all the paperwork and all the things for the government, so for the Ministry of Culture, but also for the Ministry of Defense or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, everything in Holland was designed. And so they had this huge department. And I was the youngest designer working there, and all the other people were working there, I think, for 100 years. Beards, dandruff, and they really thought when I was working on projects, they thought I was crazy or so. But what the good thing was, because they thought that I was a bit a weird person, and they thought they were very good. So they refused to do a lot of jobs. So I did all the jobs nobody else wanted to do at this government printing and publishing house. So I was working, of course, at the design department. And so basically I did all the books under the radar. So here you see a book of Karel Martens. He has a show also here in, I wanted to say Amsterdam, but of course New York. At the P Gallery, I think, so go all there. And so, but for example, I also did ads for Karel Martens, for Hardwerk, and for all the stamp books and other books. So, but nobody, of course, wants to make ads because everybody wants to make real work, identities and real books. But I did all the stuff nobody wanted to do. But at some point, Ootje Oxenaar, who designed Our Great Money, he saw all these crazy ads I was making because nobody was looking at these ads. I was experimenting. And because it was so experimental, Oxenaar said, well, whoever did these advertisements should make the next stamp books. So you can imagine that I was a sort of youngest person working at this design department of the state, and suddenly I got the best job ever. So I could make, because I did all the minor work, but I spent so much time on making it great and experimenting. Nobody was looking at what I was doing because it was not of their interest. So it was really also what I tell students always, how small the job is. Do it good, do it well, do it good, because you never know what happens with it. But at that time, of course, I was not strategic at all. I was just doing what nobody else was doing. But anyway, I got this fantastic job to make the stamp books. And stamps in the Netherlands were, and maybe still are, if you got as a designer a commission to make a stamp, then you were one of the great designers. So and actually then to make the stamp books was really sort of ultimate. And I was 28, or 27 or 28 when I made them. And here I quote Massimo Vignelli, it was before computer, you have after computer, and before computer. This is definitely before computer. It's made with cutting and pasting, and I also must say the books I made before computer are much are really more sort of more inventions than after computer. It's really different. If I see my assistant working and looking at the screen, that they think that the screen gives a solution to the problem of making something, but it's not true. If you make a book, you have to make the book as an object, in a physical form. So that's also how these books are made. They have the so-called French fold, so you can also there's printed inside, and which is of course it's very old. Chinese and the Japanese did it already, but when I did it in '88, it was very hard to produce a book with this so-called French folding. Everything about this book is looks nowadays maybe normal, but at that time it was all revolution. I have typography with no punctuation on the end of sentences. So you can imagine that many typographers were very angry when this book was published. I have a whole archive, a big box with all letters of my colleague designers. At that time I was not sure it was colleagues or enemies, because they were really very hard on me, that they said that I didn't do my job well because of the no hyphenation, no punctuation. I have all kinds of sans serif typefaces in this book. Universe, Helvetica, Gill, you name it, I all mixed them. And I must say that's basically a revenge, because when I wanted, as a trainee, wanted to work at Wim Crowell's office, Total Design, I showed my work there, of course as a student. I did a proposal for a dictionary. And for that dictionary I played with all these sans serif typefaces, which I liked very much. So the Gil had a specific meaning, the Helvetica had a meaning, all these typefaces. And at Total Design they asked me if I do that more often, mixing sans serif typefaces. And I thought they liked it, so I said, yes, of course, I do it all the time. And then they said, well, then you cannot work at our office. We only use Helvetica. And so as a sort of revenge, here everything is mixed. And it's only recently that I told Wim Krauwel this thing, and he said, well done. And he said, when I did my interview at Total Design, he was not there. I was talking to other people. And he said, of course I would have hired you. I said, well, you say that now. But then, when I started to work as a freelance designer, he gave me many, many jobs, so I totally trust him. What was also a big thing, and I always talk too long about the stamp books, because I must say they're from '88, so they're 28 years old. Yeah. And so they're very old books, but I start to like them now. I hated them also when they came out, because every page what I designed as a right page was on the left side, so it was all different. Also because I didn't design this book as pages, but as a sheet, because there was not much time. Also text is running over the edges, and the most crazy thing is that the page numbers are, Roman page numbers are on the inside of the French font. So nobody can read it and nobody can find it. And I think, and that's why I really like these books. When I made those, I was a young girl, I was naive, I had no fear. So imagine if I would do that now. I think, I'm not sure if I find any commissioner who let me do this. I don't know. Because they would always ask, where are the page numbers? And I would say, oh, they're inside. And people would say, oh, put them on the outside. And also the captions to the illustrations, to the images, are in the center of these Malevich-inspired typographic, how do you say that, squares. And they run out of the center. And also, why everything is from the center is because I made them in 3 months. I think these are one of the first books, at least for me, for sure, but I think in book design in general, where I also did all the image research, so everything you see I researched myself. Especially at the government printing office, everything was already prepared. There was always text and image, and just throw it together and then you make a book. But this is made in a completely different way. And also, when I got the commission for this book, I wanted to have a story about inspiration sources. Because in the academic world and in scientific research, it's very good if you are inspired, or if you take the research from the previous researcher and you develop from there, you develop an issue, a point. But in design, and certainly in art, if you are inspired or if you are as good as the master, it's really bad. And I was really interested in that whole notion. And if you see the Last Supper of Leonardo da Vinci, and then what Andy Warhol did with the same image, it's exactly the same image, but it's different. And I think that's really interesting. So to bring things further and to develop ideas, it's good to be inspired. But to copy, of course, is very stupid, and that happens a lot of times, especially in design. I want to find an example. I can say it here because it's not made by one of you. So it's the artist Beckman who made this thread, and then the shadow becomes the David, and then you see here a poster designed in the Netherlands. It's exactly the same idea, but completely different content. So basically this is an idea and very interesting, but the designers took the effects of the artist, but used in a complete irrelevant, not necessary form. And here I think that, but I don't say that, of course, in the book, because otherwise I had all these enemies. I don't say anything, I just show. It's only showing here. And you can make your own judgments if something is good or bad, or that you see the espresso machine here on the corner, or this old architecture. So it's all up to you if it's inspired or stolen or whatever. And also I thought it was interesting to put an element in here which has no use, it's just there. And I thought then it's interesting, and it's a sort of thought-provoking element that you think, why is this there? Is it a relation between this, or, but it has no relation. So it's just to make you think. And also, so the architecture of the Basel and then the stamp, of course there's a relation. It's the same makers. So this whole book is full of that. So you can imagine when these books came out and when I made all these comparisons, Jan van Toren stamp, famous Dutch designer, and then next to a Russian poster from 29, you can feel, yeah, it's a bit of tension, but at that time I really had no idea what the effect was of making a book. And that's of course very naive. It's stupid, basically. That you, if you make a book, it's a reproduction, it's a print run, and I love big print runs. So that people, when the book came out, that people, were angry. But there were two camps. There I had really people who admired it and adored it and thought it was courageous. And of course, I told you already about hate mail people. But it was, but suddenly, so the whole design department of the state was totally grey. And suddenly it was not grey anymore because these books came from that department. And it was the first best book design in 100 years of the existing of that department that they got an award. And basically I got all the awards you can get in the Netherlands for these books. So it was interesting what happened, and for me that I can show you these books is that I appreciate that I did it. Of course, I think there's a lot of things that I would have done differently now, but also the image quality is not that great. But it had also to do with speed, so there was no color correction, nothing. But another thing what I thought was a good idea, that every sketch of the stamp released, I show in 100%. So I never blow anything up to make it more beautiful, because if you blow up a sketch, it always becomes better. But I didn't do that, and so all the previous books always had blown up sketches, but here it's not. But anyway. So it marked my my existence as a designer, and people from all over the world came to the government printing office to have a look where these books were made, and then they would come to this extremely dull office building, extremely dull office spaces. It was like we were working like civil servants. And they couldn't believe that these books were coming from that office. So I have to quit because otherwise I can talk for hours about these books. Something completely different, and I will be more brief with this book, is a book I did for Ferrari. It's very hard to see, huh? Yeah. It's a book for tutti motori Ferrari, so all the Ferrari engines. And I was surprised that I got this commission from this very masculine Italian company, that they would invite a Dutch female designer to make a book about engines for Ferrari. And at first when I got the email I didn't believe it, because I thought there are many good Italian designers, and I thought it was spam when I got it. So in the subject it said Ferrari sport cars, so I thought, well, and I came just from a holiday from Italy, so I was deleting. But then I thought, what did I see? You have all these enlargements and pills you see in the spam. But then suddenly there was this Ferrari thing. So I went back to it, and then it was really an invitation from Ferrari to start a collaboration. But I didn't believe it, so I left the email sitting there for a few weeks. But at some point I said to my boyfriend, who's an extremely car lover, as I am, so I got this email from Ferrari. Where are they based? And he said, Maranello, you're stupid. It was really that I didn't know that. So I got this email from these people, and they want a book. Do you think that's true? It's because I really, I couldn't believe it. But then he said, well, send them an email and then you find out. And I found out. They immediately replied, and they said, can you come tomorrow to Maranello? And I said, okay. So they gave me a ticket. At that time, it's 2000. You didn't get it on a mobile phone. You had to pick it up at the airport, which I doubted. I thought it's a trick. I still didn't believe it. But then at the airport, there was a ticket to go to Bologna. And I also told them, if I go there, I have to go to Maranello. How do I go to Maranello? And then they said, well, there will be a car. Go outside, you'll find out. And of course, you can imagine there was a car waiting for me with giving a lot of gas, so it was really a lot of noise. So that was my car, the Ferrari. First time ever in my life sitting in a Ferrari. And the guy couldn't speak English. He could only say slow or fast. Quite stupid. And then I said, what do you think? Fast, of course. And then with an enormous sound. And in no time we were in Maranello. I thought it was so exciting. I thought whenever they ask, I'll do it. And of course, and then, so I went there, and it was really difficult to have a conversation because of the English. And so, but again, I brought books, and they say, yeah. They had seen my work, so they didn't want to see anything more. They said, well, let's talk. And so we really had to do that. And first they said, can you make our Christmas card? I said, well, of course. Yeah, why not? Of course. And I thought, oh, a nice Ferrari with a lot of snow on it. And it's made. But then they changed the typography. I was really angry. So without consulting me, suddenly the typography was changed. So when they finally asked me to make the Tutimo, so the older Ferrari engine book, I thought, well, I have to be on the job. So I said I want to make it, but I want to be in full control. I thought otherwise they're changing things and I don't like that. I'm a control freak, so it has to be precise. And they said, of course. And then I said, well, okay, give me the material. But it was very funny. They didn't have an archive with all the engines. So they always were waiting for me to come up with a design. But I said, you have to give me all the engines. But they said, you are the designer. I said, yeah, but you have all the engines. So for a year we were talking and not understanding. It was really miscommunication. And at some point I said, well, where can I find those? Okay, images. And then they said, oh, a guy in Torino has them all, so contact him. And I did, and then it went very fast, and then suddenly there was a book. and the guy helped me what all the engines are, because I had no idea that you have inline engines and V10, V8, and it was all these types of engines. So first I was collecting all the engines. I have a page somewhere where I do collect all the types of engines, because I had no clue. And so at some point we were in a good discussion, and I also said, well, what I like so much about engines are these exploded views, but they couldn't give it to me because that was classified information. So I only got this, a little bit dull of course, but at least I got something, because I think it's really beautiful. Okay, but in the end, yeah, the book is there, and I really like the inside of the book, but the outside I think is, I try to make it very masculine, so with this embossing and with the horse on the front, and Ferrari is only on the back side, and I really hope that they will ask me again. Maybe they will. I heard something about it, so that I can make an update of this book. Then I definitely will make a more interesting cover. And one more thing: a lot of books I make are very matte. They have all this matte paper, but this book is very oily. It's printed on glossy paper, and then it's also glossy varnish, so it really feels very oily, almost like shell. Dutch company. So it goes faster, you see, because Nina and I will have a conversation. This book is a book I made for a Dutch designer. It's very hard to make a book for a colleague, because the colleague, when I met him, at that time it was the oldest living designer in the Netherlands, Otto Troyman. There you see him. It's Otto with his friend and companion Henrian from the AG, and here Willem Zandberg, our famous designer. And a lot of people said, well, if you make a book for a graphic designer, why putting in such an uninteresting image? But I liked it very much, because Otto Troyman is here with his heroes, with Zandberg and with Henrian. And what I also liked, that they were wearing the same shirt, just a bit different. And there's another image here, also, and you see, and he also used a lot of screens. So I thought it was really interesting. And it tells a story. I think you see how he's really listening, very interested. But then this image where the Henrian, so the same guy, me, and Zandberg are swimming. They're swimming, and the photo is taken, of course, by Otto Troyman, and it's at AGI, at the AG conference. So Troyman was very proud to be a member of AG, and he showed me this photo, and I thought it was interesting, and he was so proud that he said, "I'm a member of AG, and I'm among the heroes." And so I thought, so this should be a spread, because that means a lot to Otto Troyman. But when the book came out, the colleagues of Troyman said, how can you put in such a totally stupid image on a spread? You should have dedicated it to work of Otto Troyman. And so a lot of books, when I make them, I have a lot of trouble. And the trouble, I think, is really important. The trouble makes me sharp, and then I also know that I'm doing something different. Also, when I met Troyman, he said, and I showed him my work, he said, well, I'm very afraid that this book will be your book and not my book. And I said, well, I think it's not a fear, I think it's true. Because I'm the designer. And I said, if Otto Troyman designs a poster or a calendar, it's Otto Treumann. That's why they ask us Otto Treumann to get an Otto Treumann poster or an Otto Treumann calendar. Yeah, he said, but now you are making a book for me. He said, yeah, so it will be a book where I try to do my very best to make the best book for Otto Treumann. But it's my design, of course. And but it was really difficult. It was very difficult. Also because I didn't show the work in chronological order. I showed the work what I thought was an interesting story. I wanted to tell a story. And I also felt very related to Otto Treumann. So when he prepared for a talk, he wrote down these notes, which I felt very, I feel the same about being a graphic designer as him. So, and also that he had his inspiration sources. So this is a poster he made about Vincent van Gogh, the Dutch painter. But it looks not like an Otto Treumann poster, it looks more like a Zandberg poster, so his hero. And you see that he first copied his hero, and later on he did his own posters. This is really, I don't know if you can see it, but really a very beautiful Otto Treumann poster. But Otto Treumann really looked up to his heroes. Here this is Treumann, this is him. With Dick Elvers, a hero of the time, Brussels, and Brussels, that's the name of the designer, and Zandberg. And so he was, I call it, I place it here monuments, because those were the monuments to the designers of that time. And so that's how I try to tell a story. So, but the book starts on the cover with small images. And what I try to do is have all his work on the cover, and I even it's not really true, because I had to copy more, because he didn't do that much work in all the 50 years he designed. Because nowadays, if you design with the computer, it's so fast. If Otto Treumann would go on press, for example, for this poster, he would stay 2 weeks at the printing at the press, to check the colors and let it dry and disapprove and have it reprinted, and it really had to be the best. But we now in Illustrator, we can see this in a minute how it looks. So the whole process of designing changed completely. So what he did in 50 years, we can almost do now in 1 year. So I cheated a bit here. But I also thought it was interesting to have all his work on the cover, and by turning the pages, you see that the images become bigger, and they become bigger and bigger, and in the end very big, and of course these images in between, and it becomes bigger, and the bigger it becomes, the more beautiful I think it is. And that's the very subjective part, but I think history already declared some of the works of Otto Treumann as really good. So it is a sort of subjective choice, but I think it's a choice everybody would make, because he had made very specific, beautiful works. And then when it's really at the end of the book, I have the works in detail. So you only see details of his posters. And I think that's extremely beautiful, and also a big inspiration source for other designers. But Otto didn't like it. He said the book is, as you see, a soft cover, so you can bend it. He said, I deserve a hardcover. I said, well, deserve. Anyway, and it was only 48 pages, so well, that's the publisher, I couldn't get any more pages. And so he had troubles with the soft cover, and especially with the details at the back. He said, that's not my work. So Otto Treumann, that is your work. It's you are the master of multiplying and having these prints on top of each other. And after the book came out, a lot of people were inspired by this treatment, and of course Illustrator and InDesign can do it now, but it was really beautiful. And also what I wanted to tell him, that it's important to bring somebody to another decade, to another century. And I really wanted to give Otto Treumann honestly, very honestly, the recognition and a sort of platform for the next generation, for young designers. And I think that worked that way. Only Otto Treumann didn't see it that way, so that was a pity. Huh?
Careful of time.
Sorry?
Careful of time.
Oh, yes, yeah, but I speak too long, I told you. And I didn't even bring the SHV book. So this is an important book because we're here at Bard Graduate Center. And this is the Sheila Hicks book, The Weaving as Metaphor. And for me it's an important book because I got to know Nina in the Bard Graduate Center. And with Sheila Hicks I already, before knowing Nina and before this book came to a being, I was already working with Sheila about 4 years on this project. And that's also a pity, if you make a book and there's no deadline, the book doesn't exist. So we were really working and I was making models and models and models. I have tons of models, maybe 50 or 60 of books I want to, I tried. But it was really happy that at some point Sheila Hicks got a show here, and so that we had to finish the book. But when the first time I met Sheila, so a book needs a deadline, no book, basically. That's how it works, for me at least, and I think for everybody. Because there's always another deadline. And if something that doesn't have a deadline, and so you don't work on it. But when I visited Sheila Hicks in Paris, where she lives, she's American, but living in Paris, she gave me a text to read on the train back to Amsterdam, and it's a book. It's a text from Arthur Danto, Weaving as Metaphor and Model for Political Thought. I thought it was extremely interesting, and especially for myself it was interesting, because I could understand the work of Sheila Hicks better, because I don't know anything about textile and textile art, and I don't know what is the value, or that's also so interesting about making books and having all the time these different projects, that you can see another world, that you can collaborate with another discipline, and that's really very inspiring. I think that's why I still make books, because of those collaborative efforts. But the text I really wanted to have big, and it was even bigger. I think maybe Nina still knows that it was much bigger. I thought everybody should read the text to understand the work of Sheila Hicks. And because a lot of, also at the printer they said, well, it looks like carpets. What is it? They had no idea what it is, so well, read the text. And so, and designers, of course, is a disaster. Designers, I'm not sure if I insult anybody, but a lot of designers don't read. But you have to read to understand, because if you read the text, and if you know what you're making, the answer is already in the project given. It's already there. It's only you have to find it and develop it. But anyway, so I placed the text big, and if you turn the pages, it becomes smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And by the end that you think, well, it's getting small, you've read the text. And I've heard that it really worked that way. But I remember that the publisher was not so happy about it, because I play with text. Text is serious, it's academic, so you should not play with text. And certainly not with the text of Arthur Danto. and then I said, so it was rejected, and I had to place it in a normal way. But I'm very, very stubborn, extremely stubborn. If I have something in my head, it's there, and I have to do it. And if it's not, and if I cannot do it, then I stop the project, which I did many times with this book. Also when we had an issue about the text. But at some point, so I had to change the size to a normal reading size. I said, it was a bit stupid what I said, but I said, well, is Danto still alive? And at that time he was. And then they said, yes, well, you say that. They also said Danto would not like it. And then having assumptions, I think, is also evil. You should not have assumptions. Always, because if you talk for somebody else, that's never good. Always go to the source itself. So Arthur Danto was shown the way I treated the text, and I still have the email Sheila Hicks sent to me. He said it's the first time that my text is placed in a very readable way, and he thought it was brilliant. I really kept that email because I thought it's always my evidence. So that was good. But then, of course, the edges of the book. You know the Sheila Hicks book. It has these very rough edges. So for me, it was very sort of normal thing to have the rough edges. Because further, I think, except for the typography, I didn't do that much design to the book. The edges are the image rhyme with the work of Sheila Hicks, because she always told me that the selvage, so the edges of the work, are very important. And for me, the edges of the book are very important. So it is the same. For me, it's exactly the same. But at some point when Sheila got a draft, she called me and she said, well, is this serious? You are going to do the book like this? So, yes, all the books are already done like this. She said, it looks like a dog has bitten the edges. I said, yeah, but they're all different. So she said, so they could be worse? I said, yeah, they could be worse. Oh, and I was so in panic. Because everything, so I think Nina also told me, oh, the text is very close to the edges, but this is really what I always do, is I'm very much going to the edges of things. And so that was really, the whole book, but maybe we can talk in the conversation a bit more about how the book came to a being, because it was not easy at all. For me, and the funny thing was, the first books were sent to New York for the press conference, and that was, I think, on a Monday, and on a Tuesday, I think, was the opening. And on a Monday morning, so the books were FedExed, at least a couple of books were FedExed to New York. And when I saw the 212 number, I thought, oh, I don't pick up the phone. These crazy ladies in New York, they'll scream how awful the book is and what I did, and that they fire me again. but au contraire, on the contrary, I had 2 women on the phone, and they were extremely happy with the book. I couldn't believe it. It was such a hard time to get to this point, and I couldn't believe it. And of course Nina said, you're coming tomorrow to the opening. I said, well, no way, I'm not coming. I thought they were also mean to me, I'm not coming. But then, of course, tickets were booked and also booked. And you also told me, bring suitcases with books, because they're going out of Bard Graduate Center like hotcakes. So I had to bring more and more books. So I brought Julius to carry books. So it was in the end a big success. But I think for Nina, for Sheila, for Yale, and for me, of course, for me this book became my manifesto of the book, because the book is extremely simple. I even forgot to put the title on the book. Weaving as Metaphor is missing. I think we had such a hard time about the cover, because I was forced to put a work of Sheila Hicks on the cover, but I thought, imagine if you put a work of Sheila Hicks on the cover, only 100 in textile interested people would pick up that book. But if you make a book which is more intriguing, which has more abstraction, which is that you think, what is this? You pick it up, then you won't let it go anymore. And it was very hard for me to convince everybody, I must say. But I was so convinced, and I always blame myself because I had this book in my head. I envisioned already the book, but probably I didn't explain it enough to my commissioners that how the book will look. So I thought, why don't they see what I see? I saw this white, intriguing book with the embossing of a work of Sheila Hicks on the cover. On the back side, of course, a work of Sheila. And I thought, everybody can see that would work. But it was not the case at all. And it was the time that helped me, that everybody said, well, okay, do it. And sort of, let's have the book, otherwise we don't have a book because you won't put a work on the cover anyway. And I must say, I really tried, but I really thought Sheila Hicks needs a big audience, she needs a large audience, everybody should know her work, and that you do also with the object, with the appearance of a book. So this is my manifesto for the book. And I made a book manifesto. It's released 2 weeks ago. It's called the Book Manifesto, and basically it's the catalog for the best book designs. I'm almost done actually. I have so much more, but I only show Chanel and then maybe 2 other things.
Chanel,
Chanel, bless you. So this book is a catalog about the best designed books in the Netherlands. Of course, we took that whole idea of best designed books from the United States of America, because you were first with the whole best designed book competition. And but basically, I've never entered a book to the best designed book competition, and always other people do. I think it's a bit a weird competition, and I don't like competition at all. So I didn't look at the books which were won an award. I didn't look at it at all. I only said to the photographer, open it somewhere in the middle that it lies open beautifully. Take a photo. But for me it's important that the spine is photographed. So what for me is a book, a package of paper is not a book. For me, a book becomes a book when it's bound, when it has edited content, because on the internet you have all this information, all this flux of information, all these bits of pieces of information. But what is interesting about a book, that you make something that is it's an edited, compiled content, and that it's bound. So this part for me is really also the essence of what becomes a book. It's this edited information what comes together and creates a new entity. And that is basically my statement. And it's actually also the same paper I used for the Artek book. And the Artek book, and this book is printed on a paper which is called IBO, and that means Irma Boom Office. And it's made according to my specifications. You can all use it. It's from a very big company. And what is good about this paper, it's only paper. It has nothing, no addition to it. So it stays white and it's only paper, nothing else. So basically I thought, why didn't anybody else come with this idea for the paper? It's just paper and water. That's how it's made. And so in the back of the book, basically I put my manifesto, which I also published in the, where do I have it? Of course in my pocket. The little red book, I have my statement about books. But because this is so small, nobody reads it. And that's really a pity, so I thought, well, let's put it in a big type so everybody can read my statement. And it's basically what I just said, that for me as a book is an edited version, is a non-changeable content. And because I think if you create that book with that specific content in a specific order, you create something new and something you can reflect to. And that's why I think that books are still relevant, and maybe not even relevant, as I definitely believe in the renaissance of the book. And I also have another text in this book about making books and about doubts. And this is another manifesto how I describe what for me, how I want to make books, so that I have a lot of doubt. For me, doubt is very important, because if you doubt, you think, and you create space to go maybe into other routes. Freedom is important. Authorship for me is very important. Not that I want that it should be my book, but that you really have a voice in the book. Of course, a book could never exist without collaboration. Failures are very important. I think I've made over 300 books, but of course many books are a failure, which of course I apologize everybody, all my commissioners, because that's of course very bad, but it cannot happen all the time. And about this whole idea of commissioner, maybe we talk about commissioner. Okay, because in the Dutch we have a much better word. We have the word opdrachtgever, that's giving a commission, and that's much better. I talk about my first best designed book, which actually are the stamp books. But the jury report of the best designed books about my stamp books is awful. I thought, why the hell did they give it the honor of a best designed book? Because if you read the jury report, which I published in this manifesto, is really awful. What else is important? Oh yeah, I also say something about best books, and I can maybe read it. This is the second time I have designed a catalogue for the best designed books designs. This is despite the fact that I feel no affinity with the idea of a competition, and certainly not with the verzorgd part. In Dutch it's called best verzorgd. Basically, if you translate it, it means best taken care of book. I think it's horrible. Verzorgen means production rather than design. The best ontworpen en verzorgde boeken, which my translator tells me might be translated as the best designed and produced books, would cover every aspect of a book, more than just the design, but also the way it's put together, the quality of printing, the choice of paper, the picture editing, the technique and the execution of the binding, and so on. In short, its production values. And in 1990, when I made the first catalogue for the best designed books, I called it already best book, because a book just has to be good, just good, nothing else. You can tell every story you want, but it simply has to be good. And on the edges, you see here all the words which are important to me as a designer. Words I always have in my mind when I'm designing books. Shall I only do Chanel? Yes, stop. Because no nice book with holes in it. I feel like a salesman, which I am a bit, of course. So talking about the ultimate book is of course Chanel. What I think is interesting also, the quality of the video is not that good. So if you want to have a look at the books later, feel free. Is this book for Chanel number 5. It's for me the ultimate book, so not the manifesto, but the ultimate book because it's white. I didn't use any ink. And it's a book about Chanel number 5. And when they came to me and asked me to make a book for this perfume, of course I first thought, well, it's always a bit dangerous if you have a commercial commissioner. I thought, well, I'm not going to make a commercial. I don't want to do any marketing related jobs. And they said, no, you don't have to do it. You get carte blanche. And that was the purpose. And later, of course, those words were prophetic. It is totally blank, but they invited me to go to Grasse, and it's in the south part of France, where they have all the rose fields, etc. And when I was there, the smell was gorgeous, was fantastic. And then I thought, well, that's what I should do. I should make a book where you have the idea of a smell, but you don't even. I don't know. Of course, if I would have made a book with perfume with Chanel 5 in it, then it would be in a few days it would be gone, and then in the end it also smells not so nice anymore. But I thought the idea, the illusion of a smell, that's much more interesting than the smell itself. And then why not make a book about how Gabrielle Chanel, or as the Chanel people say, Mademoiselle Chanel, how could she come to this fantastic perfume and bottle? Because the bottle, of course, is for every perfume, the bottle is the most important. It's first the bottle, then the smell. And I didn't know that, but I learned it. And so Chanel was yeah, it's very hard to see. It's very, but you can have a look. So Chanel was surrounded by avant-garde people at that time, so Cocteau and Dali and Reverdy. This is a drawing by Cocteau. So she was surrounded by all these avant-garde people, and so the perfume and the bottle, it was very logic that it would be a very sort of avant-garde. And the first beautiful and not romantic designed bottle, and the first synthetic perfume. So, yeah, I have to stop. But then I stop. I stop. And then in the audience. No, because you don't see anything. But it's the ultimate book, because if you have a PDF, you don't see anything. You need lights to see it.
You can leave it under there.
And but the copyright pages, and then I stopped with this, I think are the best. And I thought, well, why should be all this copyright for the images in it? But those are the best pages. But I always end my story with my mini books. So that's the last. Not for every book, but I did in the beginning. I made for every book. I made all these small books, these tiny books, also for Sheila Hicks and for you name it. There's all this mini stuff. And sometimes I make them even on the paper where they finally are printed on. So first I make a 100% model, and then I make all this mini stuff. So it's an endless production. I have hundreds and hundreds of these small books. This is not glued, so I have to put it. Yes. And sometimes people know that I like these small books, so they give me a book. And this book is extremely beautiful. It has the Internationale printed in it, and it's really beautifully printed. It has beautiful illustrations, and it's really fantastically made. And then you think this is, because a lot of people always say my book is small, but compare it to this. But then I show you something else, which is even better. It's this book. So then suddenly this is big, this is huge. So everything is relative. And what is so good about this book? It is bound in leather. It has gold foil on the cover, and it's made in letterpress. And you can read it, and it's made in the Netherlands. So these two books are not made by me, to be sure. And if you have this magnifier, you can read the text. And why I want to show this, because a lot of times if people see my small book, they say, oh, it's a gimmick. It's not a gimmick. Why I made it so small is to show the craftsmanship of printers and binders, that you can make a book like this. And even my first book was smaller, because every time when I produce a book, it grows. Every year it grows 3%. So if I'm 80, I have a book like that. So because I think everything always should become better. So I hope when I'm 80 that I'm a better book designer than now. Thank you for listening. Oh, I sit on the right.
This right.
So I couldn't tell about my 3-day project.
Bring it over here. We'll do it. We'll do it. So we're going to have a conversation. Irma and I have many conversations. But I think that first I want to set the record straight. And let me just say a few things about Irma's presentation. So I hear through the grapevine all kinds of things when Irma goes out to speak about our projects. And of course, the Sheila Hicks book comes up, and she has her way of describing the project, and I have mine, although I've never been able to do that publicly. So let me just say a few things from the perspective of the commissioner. In a certain degree, what she says is accurate, but she forgot certain things. Number one, the word collaboration in her manifesto.
No, I did.
Hold on. Hold on, you see. Existed in a very particular way in this project, and this goes back to the allowance of who you are as the commissioner. Because in fact, the Irma that you see is the Irma that you get. So you have to decide, right, as the commissioner. And I guess all kinds of creative choices that there are. But in the end, you have this extraordinary project and book if you let that collaboration happen in a particular way. So now I'll tell the story. The story is that at a certain point, in the course of doing this project, Irma was in my office, the color separations arrived, you probably don't tell it this way, and they were terrible.
I never tell this story
They were
anymore.
terrible. All she tells is that I fired her. And I did, there and then in my office. Because one of the things, of course, is that when you're the institution, you don't work alone. She works alone in her office with 3 other people who report to her. We work in an institution. Many museum people who are here understand this. So, of course, I'm thinking about, yes, many of the pragmatic things for which she would say, perhaps even a bit more crudely, she doesn't necessarily think about, and I had to. But there was something amazing about that firing. That firing, and I hope that Irma sees it this way, and I think she does, was transformative for both of us. Because she decided not to allow herself to be fired. And you can imagine that that would be the case from the presentation that you just heard. And I realized that I had to have her finish the project in the end. So she found the space that she needed to actually take the whole project to another level, and I found the space that I needed to become the better commissioner. And this was an amazing thing. So having said that, I just want to have one more word here, which is, after that, I got a phone call from the design curator at Aaltos. And it was a very interesting conversation because it didn't necessarily focus on the creative process of working with Irma or the book. It was, what's it like working with Irma Boom and how do you deal with it, right, as another museum person? And could I make my way through this process? And all I did was say that if you don't work with Irma Boom, you're out of your mind. That for whatever it is, the project you get, if you go to that level, and it is for every institution in a different place, and for every commissioner different. So this is the book that came out of the Aaltos project. And if you haven't seen it, you should see it, because it's the most pragmatic, functional book ever. It's an encyclopedia. I mean, an encyclopedia. But it takes the genre of an encyclopedia to a whole other level. It's an encyclopedia of California designers. So, if anything, Encyclopedia of California Designers should have Irma Boom as the book designer. We would all agree to that. But then there are things in here that are amazing, not just typography. The people in my office know this. This book made me horribly envious.
Why?
Because, you know this, it has things in it that are extraordinary. Okay, instead of having, there are color things, but it has charts. And charts are difficult to make, that are amazing. And if you have books, she talks about, you know, working in a way that this would make you think impossible. But in fact, Irma Boom is the greatest organizer of content ever. This ultimately, as the commissioner, is a gift. Because frequently, you know, the thing, we were talking about it with the students today, the harder part of curating in a way is editing. You know, how do you take this massive material, synthesize it, and structure it in a way? And as a commissioner, what Irma also does as a bookmaker is help you synthesize the material. That was something also with the Artek project that was a huge challenge, hugely challenging. We have to open it. So that's one of the things that I wanted to say just generally about working with her. And then I had to show also, this is the beginning of No. So our notebook actually started with a similar miniature. She didn't show this one, but this is it in its micro scale. So when she said that she does this for all of the books, she did, this is the finished product, second part graduate center book she did for us, and this is in fact where this book comes from. And her, so if you think about the synthesizing project, the challenge of actually perceiving something at this kind of micro scale is kind of unfathomable. Then I just want to say one other thing about connecting her with Artek. I think that Alvarado and Aina Marcio Alto would have been absolutely enthralled about this process because they were deeply invested in the visual world, but especially in the graphic world. And there are certain pages in the book where we've juxtaposed their graphic work that I had never seen before. And this is something that I feel very proud of, that I was able to kind of bring Irma Boom's eye and vision into their world. So as a commissioner also, especially if you're doing a book and you're the curator, to have that kind of eye and mind suddenly on the content greatly raises the bar. So this is just, these are just general points of interest about how those projects got woven together. But we should look at the Artek book.
Shall I turn pages there?
Sure, if you want to. But I want to ask Irma some questions before we do that, because if we get too fixated on the Artek book, we'll go down a different tangent. So, we covered the commissioner thing in a way.
Can I say something about the firing? Because it really, it's the first time ever I was fired. And I thought, that's so American. In Holland, you would never fire somebody. You would talk to the person.
Well,
You would discuss it.
Then I fired.
No, but I had to come to your office. The first thing was you're fired. I couldn't believe it. I thought it was a joke. I really thought it was a joke, so I continued working. So for me it was really, I couldn't, no. So it must be a joke. And I remember going from with a cab back to Grand Central, back to Yale. I called Julius and Sheila, said, I'm fired. And they said, funny, they all laughed. Nobody believed it.
Not even the artist. That was a whole other thing.
But I thought it was, like you said, crucial for the whole process. Yeah. So I was more attentive and more sharper, and it really had to be good. But then I still didn't dare to come to the opening. In the end, I came one day. Yeah, you booked a flight, but I was really frightened that nobody liked the book.
So, but you know, this is the anyway. We'll get past that anecdote and go on to other things. Yeah.
I think these books, I think Project Japan, you said something about editing. I know Rem Kool has asked many other designers to work on this project. I'm not the first choice, which I hate, of course. I want to be the first choice. But
can we send this that into the
Of
audience?
course.
So, because I don't know what kind of distribution this book has in the States. It should have more because it's really amazing. Can you just say something about the content?
So it's about avant-garde architecture in the 60s in Japan. And Remco Haas and Hans Ulrich Oopis interviewed these metabolist architects, as they are called. They have interviews with them about their work and about their life. It's really interesting. But the content is very diverse. It's from all over the place, and nobody could handle the information. And I was really the last person Rem called and said, well, can you help us?
That's why
And I really wanted to think about it. I said, well, I'll think about it.
If I can say something that's very important in this context, this is where there's a very fine line between how Irma portrays herself and the parallel reality also. Because she it's the synthesizing thing. She took the boxes of information, sorted it, and in an extraordinary way, both creatively but also intellectually and artistically, turned it into this book. So the line between total functionality, like the Lockman book, and creativity is amazing in that work to be able to do it. And maybe it's something that all book designers are expected to do.
Yeah, but there's
But I think it's happening here on a different level. Go ahead.
There's something else. I think what was crucial, at least what Rem says, you have to spend a lot of time together. Because if you make a book, it's not that I spend time on it. The commissioner has to spend time on it as well. It's a mutual interest and mutual ambition. And I think what was interesting with Project Japan, that Rem lives around the corner of my house. He would come at 7 o'clock to my office. We would discuss the process, and he would come back in the evening. So it was a continuous talking and talking and talking and talking about handling the information. And it was a year. It was exactly a year, day in, day out, talking about to get the book done. Because of and every morning I would have a proposal. We would discuss this proposal during the meeting. During the day I would develop it again and would show it in the evening. So it was really very intense.
So 2 things that I just want to be absolutely sure of come out in this forum. The first thing is, I was hoping that Irma could talk about her relationship to history. Because I think that this is very important. Irma has a knowledge base, not just in the history of bookmaking, but she would spend a lot of time here in New York, for example, in the reserves of the Morgan Library, for example, in the best libraries possible with the richest collections of historical books, like at the University of Amsterdam, for example. So could you say something about your relationship to the history of bookmaking and to old books in general?
Wow. Well, first of all, I think that everything has been done in book design, but it's now how you... so I always look at old books, I must say. If I go to a library, I ask for the old books, the old printed books. I'm after Gutenberg, not before. And so after 1455. And so for me it's interesting how in the early days the produced books were made, and then you see that those books were very much avant-garde, and that's a big inspiration source for me. And old books are more inspiration sources for me than new books, but because it's always derived from, so you can better look at the source. So Nina told already that I got this state prize, the Vermeer prize. Then you get 100,000 euros. This is really a lot of money. And you have to spend it in your own field. So what I did, and that's to make my research more effective, I started a library. I have already a library with old books, so from 1600 and 1700, books from 1600 to 1700, and books from the 60s. Because there are 2 moments that books and bookmaking was interesting and was a sort of revolution. And those moments for me are important. So that's why I go to libraries and want to see the old books. And then if I see those old books, and if I, of course I prefer also to go to shops, because then I can buy them. If I go to a library, I cannot have them, and I want to have them, of course.
But there's something, the beauty of thinking about the way that history informs the contemporary practice is something that I hope that if there are any younger book designers in the audience, that this is something that you might actually contemplate. Because I think that when you work in the contemporary, the inclination, of course, is to simply disregard history. And this is somebody who uses history in the most extraordinary way. The other thing is I wanted to go back to the Rijksmuseum, because one of the most revealing experiences I had with Irma, and I had no idea about the scope, was understanding the kind of work that she does at the Rijksmuseum, from reinventing the title of the whole graphic identity of the museum, but the museum's name, which was a hugely polemical problem in the Danish press. Maybe she'll tell us about that. And she continues to do work for the Rijksmuseum. So you could argue that that's like working for the National Gallery or for the Athenaeum in Finland, which tends to be the most conservative institutions of the country. So the Rijksmuseum has, I like to say, a retainer, Irma Boom. So this is something that I think is also very interesting in terms of which people decide that they want to be her commissioners. So could you say something about your relationship with them?
What do you want to know?
How you work with them?
Okay. Well, so I worked already before designing the logo and the whole identity. I worked already for the Rijksmuseum, but there was a sort of thing going on because the Stedelijk Museum, so the Contemporary Art Museum, had a competition, my first competition, and which we all didn't like. We don't like competitions as designers. I think it's more agencies and other people. But anyway, so I really have to tell the story. So I worked on a competition for the Stedelijk Museum together with Mavis and Van Deursen, two British designers, graphic thought facility, and two French designers. And I did not win. I was second. A second is nothing, so you lose. And I thought when that guy, the director, called me, "Oh, you didn't win. You're second." So I lost. So I think that let's be totally clear then. And then that same evening, I had an event at the Rijksmuseum, and the first thing the director of the then director of the Rijksmuseum, Wim Pijbers, asked me, "Well, how is it going with that contemporary art, with the Stedelijk Museum competitions?" I said, "I lost." He said, "Well, great."
Hired.
So, and he said, "Well, you are making our logo. You will be our designer for the new Rijksmuseum." So that was easy. So no competition, and it's boring.
Well, no, maybe long.
And so, and they gave total trust, and I think we did it all in a few months. It was all arranged, and it's just a logo, Rijks Space Museum. I should have brought it, of course. And it has just a space between two words, and there was a lot of commotion in the Netherlands about Rijks Space Museum. We have a space police in the Netherlands. Maybe I'll tell about it when I show it.
Okay.
So,
while Irma is looking forward, I just want to say that for the first time in our history of working with Irma for the Artek project,
this is Rijksmuseum. Oh, so it's a very, very, very simple logo. And the space, so I thought I put the I and the J together. And that's in the Dutch language, that's the only...
Take it down. Down. I can't see it.
Oh, sorry. That's the only... our language is the only sound with the I and the J. So it's I, Rijksmuseum. But you guys cannot say this, because everybody says Rijksmuseum. They all say something else. So I made an image out of it. And I thought to make it specific and to make the generic word separate so that everybody recognizes it. I just put a little space between it so that Rijks becomes a sort of image, and the word museum is of course for everybody readable and understandable. But when the logo was released or presented, it was hell. I couldn't go out for 2.5 weeks out of the office. TV and radio and newspaper people, they were all in front of my office only because of this space. and I thought, why this space? Because I thought the I and the J, which is not really a letter, so I made it up. I thought that's for typographers and for a lot of people that's the problem. But what do we have in the Netherlands? You cannot believe it. We have a space police. So people who check if there is a word which has not a space or a space too much. And so they made a whole fuss about that space. So it was on the 8 o'clock news, it was on every newspaper. They asked everybody on the street what they thought about the new Rijks Museum. And they called me, can you come on the television show? Can you do this? Can you do that? And I did none of it, nothing. I thought the moment I go into a discussion with a journalist about why I did this space, then I'm trapped. So I only said if somebody asked me something, I made a logo. Because if you make a logo, you have artistic freedom, and you don't make a new spelling, you make a logo. It's like the Met. This is Rijks Museum. And but they said, well, everybody in the Netherlands will spell the Rijksmuseum wrongly, because the Rijksmuseum in our language is one word. So it's not Rijksmuseum, it's one word. And so it was so terrible that I thought the Rijksmuseum will ask me to take out the space, because it was everywhere. But so again, I didn't say anything, the Rijksmuseum didn't say anything, but suddenly in the newspaper everybody was explaining why I did the space there. It was really interesting. So a professor from Leiden, a linguistic person, and then another person from an historical thing. So everybody was defending me because I didn't do anything. And in the end, of course I had to say something, but when the museum was founded in 1885, it was spelled like this. It was the this Rijksmuseum. This was the original way of writing museum. So that was for me also, the why I did it like this.
Ultimate vindication. I think that moment. Extraordinary that it ends up being grounded in the history of the museum anyway.
Yeah, but
That's just
can
amazing.
you imagine not, I think we really have to stop.
Yes, we will.
We have time for one or two more questions.
Yes, yes.
I have a question.
Yes.
Could you talk about failure, what makes a book a failure, and whether any of your books were, in your mind, successful at first and became failures, or the other way around?
Oh.
Did everyone hear the question? It's a wonderful question of how Irma actually, or what constitutes failure in her mind in terms of books, and whether or not a book that's failed could become a success. Am I correct, or
Yeah.
vice versa?
I think every book which is just printed and coming to my office from the binder is a failure. It's always bad. I never like it, and it's really bad. And so for me, it's always very hard to see if it's good or if it's bad. For me, it's really problematic. And
This is an exception, because when Irma called me to tell me that the book was there, she said, "I love it." Which, hearing that, I thought, okay, that was just it. So there are exceptions.
there are exceptions, because I thought it would not be so good. So it was okay. And no, it was absolutely true. But basically, I'm not very excited about anything what comes from a binder. And then I see the missed opportunities and missed possibilities, and I think, oh, I should have done that. But like the stamp books I just showed, I think they were totally bad. And it's only, after 25 years, I thought, well, maybe they were not so bad. So for me, it's only in retrospective that I can say if something is maybe good. So in the beginning, for me, it's very hard to say. And yeah, you have something. If you shoot an animal, you cannot eat meat directly. It has to die. I don't know the word for it, but that's what I have with a book. It has to die. Every issue, every argument, every trouble I had with the book, I immediately see when it comes. So it really has to, the dust has to go down, and maybe it becomes a nice book. You never know. That project Japan, I thought, well, did I work a year on it, day and night? I cannot believe it. But if I see it now, I think, well, maybe it's okay. And but yeah, to answer your question, I think the stamp books now, I think, are very nice. I love them. I love if I see that, I think, well, I had no fear. I was naive. That I did it, that I actually did it. I would never do those books now anymore. And I've made many failures. They are described in this little red book. And I made actually a book for a library, for an architect who's renovating the library here in New York, the public library, Francine Hoebe, Meccano. I made a book for her library in Delft in the Netherlands, the Technical University Library. And the book I made for her, I think, is horrible. It's terrible. But I described it. I did a book for David Selley, an American artist. You probably know. It's horrible. It's horrible. And I describe why it's horrible. And not in retrospect, I think it's even worse.
Can I say though that in terms of moments perhaps in a more hermetic way, when Irma is at her place, her workspace, maybe at 2 o'clock in the morning, things happen that transform projects. Like within 4 days that this book was supposed to go to the printer, she said, I changed the color of the cover. I was having
material.
I was having a cardiac arrest. Okay, already we're talking about schedules. And
I don't care.
right, but so
Pretty good.
but just to say that not to say that if the color hadn't changed, it would have been in the failure category, but something at an instant turned the cover into this, which for the content is what you can think what you want about it. But for me, it's actually the right feeling. There's an organic quality about this for the content.
It's better.
It's extraordinary, really. I mean, yeah. And when you touch it, it feels that way too. So this is Artek.
Yeah.
This is a wood product.
But you were very generous and you totally trusted me. But
4 times after 4 times, you kind of really were. But I just think that even for the designer to have the courage to make those decisions is rather exceptional, because you have to have the strong enough constitution.
I think until there are moments to change, I keep on thinking about it and changing, and even at some point also with the images in the book, I think I'm always, until it goes to press, I really use all the time I have. At some point they have to print a cover. They said we have to print a cover. So then I deliver, of course, and I always deliver. I've never had a book too late, never. This was beyond my control, actually, that it's only there now, to be honest. But I use the time to always think, how can it be better. That's my only issue. It has to be good, and you never know if it's good.
So I just say one more thing about this book. If you see that the cover and what you see at the entry to the exhibition is not necessarily the title. It's a title that was a title in my mind, that I wanted the title to be. And when Irma and I first talked about the book, I said, this is the title I want. And there were various levels of, shall I say, pushback about this title. But she heard me the first time, believed also that this should be the title, and made the treatment. And when everybody at the Bard Graduate Center, is Grace still here, first saw the book like this, they said, and Ian, for the exhibition, we said, this has to be the graphic identity of the exhibition. And then when it actually got on the jacket, I said, I don't care if it's the title or not, I'm going with this. So there's a weird thing about this book. It actually kind of has
No,
a double identity. in a sense.
but it's your love for both of them, for Alvar and Aino, and
Yes.
that's it.
And it's extraordinary what's going on here graphically of the connection. You know, I mean, so simple, yes, but she thought about it. And, you know, that one line, I mean, this is very amazing in terms of the curatorial thinking.
Yeah,
translated
but that's
into the
always
graphic
the
thing.
collaboration. That's the collaboration, and I think what a commissioner tells, there always the answer is already there. You just have to grab it.
Yeah.
Uh,
So,
pretty rich.
one more question, if there is one. Otherwise, thank you so much for coming and for your patience and staying with us for this long.